Hey guys, we're going to talk about types of competition, and what we're talking about is that there's in our economic system and in systems that are exhibit some amount of capitalism. We see these different types of competition taking place, and so there's four different ones that we're going to talk about here for a little bit. So they're perfect, monopolistic, oligopoly, and monopoly. And so don't get monopolistic and monopoly mixed up. They're vastly different. Okay. So as we go, this would be a good time to have that outline sheet in front of you to fill out, and you'd be able to fill out the different components of your outline. So we have a bunch of different types here. So we have four different types. This gives you kind of some real world examples of those, but we'll talk about those as we go. So perfect or pure competition is the first one. So what we're saying in perfect or pure competition is that we have a product that is so similar that you are unable to distinguish it from other products of the same thing. So an example of this might be apples. Let's say that you have farmer or A on right side of the road, farmer B on the left side of the road, and they're both raising Gala apples. And they grow their apples, they go and they pick them, and the truck from farmer A is pulling onto the road, and the truck from farmer B is pulling on the road. They hit each other, the apples spill everywhere. And can they distinguish between farmer A and farmer B's apples and actually get them to who they belong to? And the answer is that they probably aren't going to be able to do that. The apples are the same type of apple, and so they're not going to be able to tell their apples apart. So we have it's a single type of product, and the product is so similar that you can't tell it apart. Okay. Now there's also a couple other things that you need to know about perfect or pure competition. Pretty much anyone can sell apples. It doesn't take much to grow apples, and so there's no real barriers to entering the market, and so that you end up with many people selling apples. So we're going to use some very descriptive words. Many, a lot, some, few are words that we're going to use here. Just know that many is greater than a lot is greater than some's greater than a few, etc. Okay. So we have many buyers, we have many sellers, so many people purchasing apples, we have many people selling apples, and because of that, what that means is that when it comes to control over price, nobody has control over price. The buyer can't try to charge more, the buyer can't try to convince the seller to sell it for less, because if he tries to do that, the buyer or the seller, will just say, no thank you, you can go find someone else, and try to convince them to sell you an apple for cheaper. The buyer can't try to charge more, because the same thing happens. The seller will just say, yeah, no thanks, you can try to convince someone else. There's a lot of other places for me to get apples from. So neither one of them can affect the price. So what we end up happening in perfect or pure competition is we see what's called supply and demand take place. All right, so we're gonna end up with supply and demand taking place, and because of that, we end up with what's called a the equilibrium, or market price, the market equilibrium, which is basically just saying that supply and demand, where those intersect, that's what's going to determine the price of the good. So you have supply and demand determining the price of a good rather than a seller or a buyer determining the price of a good. Okay, so that's perfect pure competition. It doesn't really happen a whole lot. Like up here, you'll notice it says perfect competition is quite rare in today's world. We don't see this very much. Even up here where it says it gives real world examples of corn. Corn isn't a real world example because the federal government sets the price of corn. So it's not allowed to be in perfect competition. Alright, that brings us to monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition says that we have a lot of sellers. So remember, a lot is less than many. So we have a lot of people who are selling it, and we have many buyers, so many people who are purchasing the item. However, we have we do have some control over price now, and what's happening is that we're selling similar products but they're distinguishable. So now we have two products that are similar to each other. They might do the same type of thing, but we can tell them apart somehow. Okay, and because we can tell them apart, we're going to use what's called product differentiation, and we're going to focus on the differences and try to convince people to pay different amounts due to those differences. Okay, so I have an example for you, and that example is pens. So on the right there, you've got Bic pens, and you can get a whole box of 12 for $2.99. Okay, so you can get, for $3, you can get a box of pens, or you can buy this one Henry Steinway limited edition pen from Montblanc and pay $2,810 for that pen. All right. So Montblanc pens range from $225 to $8,900. So then we say they have some control over the price, but that control is pretty significant if we're able to convince someone to pay $2,000 more, almost $3,000 more for a pen than what we're selling it. So although they are similar products with similar characteristics, they're distinguishable from each other, and because of that, we can use product differentiation to convince someone that the one's better quality, or it lasts longer, or it's just a luxury good, or whatever the reason is, but we differentiate our product and we're able to charge more because of it.